welcome Preston Dennett to the Sabbath at Midnight Dreamland Redux. Please, if you want to add to that and also give out your website on where the listeners can find your books and more importantly, how to find you.
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. I do have a website. If you just punch my name in, it should take you there. It's PrestonDennett.weebly.com. And I'm all over social media. You can get my books on Amazon. I have a YouTube channel. I'm working hard to get this information out. As you can imagine, all these books. I'm working on more.
Absolutely. How I came along finding you is I got a gift from my son. It was on Father's Day. It's called Supernatural California. And I I started looking through. I was like, Preston Dennett, who is this guy? And I started doing research. Like, wow, he knows a lot. I mean, the knowledge you have regarding this space is just like none other, really. And I've spoken to several people in the UFO community, but you're one of the most prominent ones that have a lot of information and a lot of stories. And I don't know, Preston, do you work with MUFON at all, or?
I started out, very heavily involved with them, because they were really the only group out. Well, I won't say the only group. I joined every group I could find, actually, to be honest. I did become a field investigator for MUFON back in 1988 and did a good number of cases for them and turned in all the materials, and at some point kind of started working more independently. I'm still a MUFON member. I'm still a field investigator. I still get the journal that they publish each month and speak at some of their meetings or their conventions too, as well. So I support MUFON, but I do most of my work independently of them.
Mm-hmm. And since you and I are both here in Southern California, kind of before we start this podcast, I kind of brushed over all the sightings I've had out here, and there's been I've seen more than 10 sightings out here, and it's interesting because it seems like it's more frequent now. If the listeners out there, if you're ever outside and you have a good cell phone camera, I recommend getting a night vision scope, because sometimes these things, I mean, you could barely see them. The light they're emanating is like naked to the eye most of the time. And what's fascinating is currently the U.S. Here in the U.S. that David Grush that came out, whistleblower.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm not butchering his name. And that Kid Angel in Las Vegas with that. The video is really grainy. I've tried to get a hold of him and he's gone dark, but you can see someone who really studies that video frame by frame and enhances the video. There are things in there, and what they are, I don't know. It's just fascinating that I think for the most part, people who do want to believe in this genre, in this space of other life out there, they go into, in my opinion, a cognitive dissonance. It doesn't compute in their head. So it causes much consternation, stress, and they just don't want to deal with it. But I think more and more with people like yourself, Preston, bringing this information out, I think it's going to help people along and identifying that, yes, there are other entities out there. And I know you have many stories, and however you want to do this, it's up to you, buddy. I've listened to your shows, and your information is just outstanding.
Hey, I appreciate that. Yeah. And my sympathy to those who have trouble believing in this, because I was there. I mean, I came into this field as a skeptic,
mm-hmm.
and it knocked me over. And I get it, because it doesn't fit into a lot of people's worldview.
Mm-mm.
And when I've interviewed people who had full-on encounters, very close up, and they looked away. They looked the other direction. They did not want to look.
Mm.
So, that's how hard it is for some people to deal with this.
Oh, absolutely. It's a paradigm shift. Now, one of the CE5s I interviewed, to this day, he doesn't go out at night anymore. It's just
Really?
he will not go out at night. He does everything during the daytime, because what happened to him was he got memories back, and he saw these things, and he was inside the ship, and he saw what he could only recognize as hybrids. And
Wow.
one of them, I guess the main one, the leader, was I don't know if you heard this or if you heard stories about this, but it was approximately 5 foot in height, pale skinned, and stringy platinum hair. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, it was a really strange story, and it was in Central California.
Doesn't surprise me. I mean, I get so many reports. I think one of my favorite that I got fairly recently comes from a lady who does not want her name used.
Okay.
But she's a good witness. She's a school teacher, did daycare as well, really intelligent. And she was living in O'Fallon, Illinois, actually, at the time. This was 2006, mid-November. It was not long after, actually, the Chicago O'Hare sighting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've heard of that.
I did.
Very famous sighting. But this is a crazy case. I mean, I don't have one quite like this. And she called me, actually, because she'd read something similar in one of my books. But what happened to her was she likes to go jogging really early in the morning. We're talking like 3:30, 4:30 a.m. And she was out there jogging near her home in O'Fallon. This is a pretty rural area. And it was mid-November, as I said, 2006. She's got her dog with her. She goes down her street, up another street, till she reaches a street called Kyle Road. And there's a T intersection in front of her.
Mm-hmm.
And, she takes this route daily. So she sees deer, sometimes fox, raccoon. But her dog sees something first and stops. So she's not really paying attention until her dog stops and looks ahead. And she sees something too. And normally this is, not a busy road, but certainly there would be cars driving up and down it. Not at this hour. But she saw something walking down the center of the road, all right.
Uh-oh.
It was very tall. And her first thought was that this was a man on stilts with extenders on his arms.
Mm.
Yeah, what she was seeing made no sense. It was far too tall to be a normal person. So she's kind of staring at it, and this thing walks right in front, actually next to the street light, hanging over the intersection there. And she got a huge shock because this thing was not human. And she was later able to estimate its height exactly compared to the streetlight. She's saying it's 15 feet tall.
Wow.
Right? And she said, first she thought maybe it was a grasshopper looking thing, but she says, no, it looked more like a praying mantis.
Oh.
Now, she doesn't know that this is even a thing. There are different types of ETs. And praying mantis is certainly one of them. But she's watching this thing take 6-foot strides. It's moving real quickly. It's just booking it down the street. And its head is turned down. And it's kind of scanning back and forth as if looking for something that, I don't know, she had the impression, that's the impression she got.
Mm-hmm.
Her dog's watching it. She's watching it. And it was a pretty quick sighting. I mean, it just walked by. And I don't know how I would have reacted if I would have turned and run home.
I don't know.
I don't know, but she didn't. She actually, to her credit, took off running after this thing and ran up to the intersection there and looked down the road just in time to see this thing moving off into the cornfield. And there was a cornfield there.
Mm.
I asked her what else was there. She's like, really nothing. A few homes. There's a high school.
Mm-hmm.
And she tried to see if there was any evidence of it. Of course, there wasn't. But yeah, she had never heard anything like this. This was really the first time she'd seen anything like this. Wasn't the first time she's had some weird experiences, I found out later. But I asked her if there's any reason she thought that might have been there. She's like, I really don't know. The only thing I can tell you is we're about 6-7 miles as the UFO flies from Scott Air Force Base.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that kind of did ring a bell for me because Scott Air Force Base has been implicated in a few sightings. There was a big triangular UFO that flew right over Scott Air Force Base, and they completely denied it. But a lot of police officers saw it. I think it may have been reverse engineered, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
U.S., from us. But yeah, that was one of the craziest cases of a 15-foot tall praying mantis. And she had called me because I did interview a Navy medic some years earlier who also had an encounter with that tall of a figure.
Wow.
Yeah. But
that's
I did
frightening.
more questioning with her, and I found out some other stuff. Turned out she did have childhood encounters with little beings. She believes she was pulled on board and perhaps given a surgery or an operation of some sort. And she said she had two really weird experiences with, she thought maybe she wasn't sure, a demon or a hybrid. I'm leaning towards a hybrid because she was in the passenger seat of a car.
Mm-hmm.
She was a high school student. This is in California, actually. And there was a little kid in the back seat and someone else was driving. And she's just kind of daydreaming a little bit when the kid in the back seat gasps really loudly. So she perks up and looks out the passenger window, and this car has just pulled up. And the person driving was, she said, not normal. He had a huge egg-shaped head with little spriggles of hair on it, totally bald, but not normal-shaped. And it turns and looks at her, and she said it was just dark eyes, completely black. She's like, I don't know what that thing was, but it was not human. So I don't know. But she later had a repeat experience like that at the Sam's Club department store where she saw one of them walking around behind her. And she didn't want to stare, so she turned away and then turned back, and it was gone.
Wow.
She said it was the same type of black-eyed, bald-headed figure, which didn't look normal.
Did she mention if anyone else noticed these entities?
Not in the Sam's Club. No one appeared to even notice. But with the other one, the little kid.
Yeah.
Notice.
Wow.
So some of these cases just get what I would call high levels of strangeness. Just weird. Really weird.
Absolutely. It's, I don't know. If I saw something with black eyes, I'm just going to, step on the gas. See you later. I don't know what those things are. And that 15-foot tall mantis thing, whatever, man, I wouldn't have chased that thing. Not without a weapon, because I don't know if it's going to, try to hurt me. And it's just, she had a lot of bravery to go after it.
Yeah. I asked her if she went jogging the next morning. She's like, of course. I was hoping I would see it again.
Wow.
Okay. But she did some research in it, and she did find that about 40 miles away, some years, I think it was before her, there was another gentleman who saw something somewhat similar crossing the road, which he described as a mantid, but he said it was on 4 legs.
Mm-mm.
And so I don't know. It's not really confirmation, but to a level of corroboration, perhaps.
Right.
But yeah, weird case for sure.
That is an interesting story. It seems like from childhood on, I wonder if she's still seeing these things to this day. It's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. She told nobody except her family, and happened to stumble on my story or my book, and that's why she called me. But she did say one kind of interesting end note, that they had invited the neighbors over for dinner, and it turned out the husband of her friend was a colonel at Scott Air Force Base. And stupid her, she spills out her guts about her UFO story, and he's kind of looking at her, rolling his eyes a little bit. And what she asked him, she says, have you ever heard of anything like this? And he seemed really evasive. She had the feeling that he knew something about it.
Right.
So I don't know, but yeah, that was her impression. But no, she does not talk about it to people for, obvious reasons.
Right, right. Yeah, people usually coin them schizophrenic or dissociative identity disorders, or just various psychological, things that they'll tag on them. They'll give them a name place. There's stories out there, Preston, that the military is working with ETs in deep underground bunkers.
Yeah, well, I've certainly heard of them. I'm not sure how much credence I give to most of those, honestly. I think probably there is some stories that are absolutely true. There's a very well-known one that President Eisenhower met with ETs at Edwards Air Force Base in 1954, February. And I think the reporting on that is actually really solid. So that, I think, is one good example. And yeah, there's a lot of cases of UFOs hovering over military bases. There was a very famous incident where apparently a UFO crashed near Fort Dix. And they did recover some ETs, shot at one, actually, and killed it. And so I know that there are cases like that, but I personally haven't gotten any cases like that I find super credible. So I don't know. I've concentrated most of my research on people who have had face-to-face contact or been, taken on board a craft.
Right.
And I have a lot of those cases.
Oh, let's hear them.
Oh, yeah. Well, here's one. I like this story because this was the lady I worked with for years.
Okay.
Connie Lopez.
All right.
And I don't really talk about UFOs when I'm at work, right? Because it's not appropriate. But it comes out, and everyone there knew. I don't work there anymore, but they all knew. Certainly, even my boss, who was very, okay with it. And I've had different bosses actually, and they were all okay with it. But this was an interesting story because someone had given me. Actually, it was one of my bosses, a young guy. He was probably my favorite boss because he was really laid back. But at any rate, he loved this subject and had bought me a little alien statue of a gray alien. I'm like, oh, thanks. And I put it on my desk. And in walks Connie I forget what, for whatever reason. And she sees that statue on my desk and actually screams out loud and points at it. And she's like, what the heck is that? I'm like, Connie, what do you think it is? It's a gray. And she's like, well, I don't know. But I can tell you I've seen one of these things. And that's how I got that story. And I like that because this is someone I knew. I could tell if she was lying or not. She was clearly shook up just to see the statue. And yeah, she had a pretty interesting story to tell. She was living in Pacoima with her husband, and they had just had a baby. And he was about a week old, so a newborn, and was sleeping in a crib in their bedroom. And the crib was in the corner of the room, and it was right below a large picture window, which you can't open. This is an important detail. It's kind of fixed to the wall. You can't open the window. And so she wakes up one night because she hears this weird squeaky sound, kind of like when you wash a glass dish with soap and it goes wee, 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 kind of squeaky, right?
Right.
So she wakes up and she's looking around, and she sits up in bed and looks to the window and gets a huge shock because there is a gray standing in front of the window, looking down at her baby. It's got its hands, both hands on the window, and it's trying to open it. This was her impression. She said she could see little suction cups on the tips of its fingers. That's a rare detail I've only heard maybe a couple of times,
right,
even in the literature, but she described it very much clearly. Said it was about 6 feet tall. This is not a short little guy. Very skinny. If it was wearing anything, it was skin tight. It was your typical gray. Almost no mouth, a tiny little nose, big black wraparound eyes, bald, a huge head. And this darn thing is trying to open the window.
Wow. Which
I found bizarre because so many people tell me about how these things just walk right through the wall. Right? So that was weird. And it was looking down at the baby, then it would look up at the mobile, the little hanging thing from the ceiling, a mobile, and then down at the baby. And so she starts to scream, and it looks at her dead in the eye. She's looking at it. They've locked gazes, and she says a force from this guy slammed her down into her bed.
What? Wow.
And she was paralyzed. She says it was like being a force field pressed down over her. And I've heard this from other people. This was kind of a very vivid account of it. But she couldn't speak. The only thing she could move was her eyeballs. When she's watching this thing, she says tears were flowing out of her eyes and into her ears, because this went on for a good couple of minutes. While this thing tried several times, she thinks, to open the window, and finally just gave up and walked off. Of course, she flies out of bed, scoops up her baby, and starts screaming at her husband, a thing. The thing was in the window. It was a creature. And he's like, honey, you had a nightmare. What you're describing doesn't exist. She's like, no, I know what I saw. And she stayed up all night. And in the morning, she says, I am leaving. I will be at my sister's. You can stay here. I'm taking the baby and I'm going. And she did. She stayed away for about a week or two. And her husband begged her to come back. She's like, listen, you got to come back. You can't live at your sister's. She says, I'm not coming back unless we buy guard dogs. And he's like, well, okay. So they bought a couple of German Shepherds. And she moved back in and stayed a few days. And she says, I can't do this. Mm-hmm. Let's sell the house. And that's what they did. They sold the house, bought another one in the same neighborhood. But yeah, she couldn't take it. And I found that case particularly interesting because I have to tell you, I've talked to a lot of people who had this experience, and some of them are pregnant, 9 months pregnant, or just had their baby. Mm-hmm. This seems to be a draw for the ETs. They're very interested in human reproduction. I suspect they were kind of just checking up on her, and that probably she is a contactee, but she has no memory of it. She says that this has never happened before. It was a one-off. Her kid's all grown up now. He's an executive for Pepsi, actually. And he's like, no, I've never had any experience. He doesn't remember, of course. He was 5 days old. But yeah, that's a weird case.
That's frightening, Preston. Something out there looking at you through a window, and all of a sudden it hits you with some kind of force, and you can't move. I don't know. What are your thoughts and your experience? Is that technology they're using to paralyze people, or is that something, telepathy wise, some kind of telekinetics or telekinesis?
Yeah, I think it is psychic. And the more I research this subject, I think that is most of what we're seeing. A lot of people think, oh, this is technology doing this. In some cases, yeah. And I'll give you a good example of why I think this, because I just put out a book called Symmetry.
Oh, okay, good, great.
Yeah, not too long ago. It's probably my favorite because the main witness is Dolly Safran. Mm-hmm. And she's a nurse. She's worked in the Department of Defense for a while. She's a zookeeper, lifeguard. I mean, a good witness, very well educated. And her experiences are crazy because she remembers them without the aid of hypnosis. A lot of people have missing time. Mm-hmm. Not her. And it was scary a little bit and confusing in the beginning. But at age 14, while living in the Florida Everglades, she had this UFO drop down behind her house. She could see little gray guys through the portholes there. And next thing she knows, her room is filling with light. She had missing time. That was the last time, pretty much, that she had missing time. Because the next morning, after she found out that there were other sightings in the area, and her dad kind of recognized what was going on because she didn't know it at the time, but he's a contactee as well, which is pretty much true for contactees. It's generational. But she went into the bathroom and meditated and recalled being taken on board and had this awesome experience, which was very benevolent, actually. Mm-hmm. But she learned then and there that the craft themselves are embodied by an entity and that they are flown psychically.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually taught her how to do it. So it was really interesting to me because I've talked to other people who've had that kind of experience, but they didn't have great recall, in terms of beginning to end. But she did. And we go into a lot of detail in this, but a lot of what people think is technology is them, using psychic abilities when they're coming through the wall, for example, or levitating a person up into the craft, or healing them even, though I will say often technology is used in some of the healing cases. But yeah, psychic abilities is a big part of all of this.
Yeah, I heard in circles about what you just mentioned. These things are one with this crafts. It's kind of like whatever they think. That's what the ship does. The craft does. It's almost, I don't know, Preston. It's almost like the craft is biological too, in some sense. Some type of, I don't know. Obviously, I have no idea how they're made, but it seems tied in with them.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's what Dolly says. That's what other people have told me. It's really interesting because a lot of them just got to get a glimmering of this. There was one guy I interviewed who, again, doesn't want his name used. Mm-hmm. This was some time ago. Now people are a lot more open to it.
Right.
But he had a really scary for him, experience
mm-hmm.
where he's driving up the 5 freeway in the Central Valley of California
mm-hmm.
late at night. And if you've ever taken that drive, it's pitch black.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it's a little scary. I've done it, driving to conventions and stuff. I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore because it's a tough drive. And there's nothing out there, in parts, certainly. So he's driving along with his friend, and he's the kind of guy, he says, who, if he's going to go anywhere, he's going to drive. He's not going to ride with anybody. He wants to drive. So they're driving along, and they see what they first thought was a crop dusting helicopter straight ahead of them on the 5 freeway, a mile ahead or so.
Mm-hmm.
And they're discussing it. He's always been interested in UFOs, always wanted to see one. He's like, if ever I see one, I'm going to run up to it. I'm going to knock on the door and say, hey, what's up? And as they got closer and closer, his fear started to grow, he said, because he could see that this wasn't anything normal. And as they pulled up right next to it, this thing kind of went off to the side of the freeway and came right down. And it was real close. And it was covered with colored lights that were kind of transmogrifying all around it. Orange, red, blue, yellow, all these colors.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it was weird because there was this fog that was just all surrounding it.
That's weird.
Tendrils of it. And made it hard to see exactly what it was. But he had this distinct feeling this thing was alive in and of itself. And he felt certain it was coming to get them. And sure enough, it sends down this beam of light, which kind of plays across the field, and it's coming towards them. And they both are like, uh-oh, it's gonna get us. And wham, this light hits them. And the next thing they know, they're quite farther along on the road. It's a couple hours later, though they didn't notice this immediately. And he's not driving anymore. He's in the passenger seat. His friend is driving, and they cannot talk. Each time they try to talk, only nonsense words will come out. He said it was the strangest thing. They just kind of babbled at each other. And it took them a long time to get back to normal. And as soon as they could actually talk, they shut up about it and didn't talk about it for weeks. And then, he says he almost forgot about it,
mm-hmm.
but remembered it. And his friend refused to talk about it. He said it was just too darn scary. He started to have memories of the car being pulled over, him stumbling over to it and getting pulled on board. He never remembered anything more than that. He doesn't want to. But boy, it changed his life.
I bet.
He not only knows it's real, but he quit his job, he left his girlfriend, he moved to Hawaii, off-grid, lived in a cave, and started collecting as much food as he could. Because And this is something I do see with a lot of contactees. They get a message like,
wow.
Move off grid, collect food. There's a real possibility of environmental and social collapse. Get ready for a rough ride. And he seemed to have gotten that sort of subconsciously.
Wow.
But yeah,
Really
he was shook up. Even when I interviewed him, his voice would shake. So I felt bad for him, honestly, because for him it was a pretty negative experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard that story before from the with the witnesses I interviewed. It's definitely impactful. They're never the same again.
Yeah, well, you've seen them, so you know what it's like. I remember my first sighting.
Well, you know what, Preston? I tell you what. I started seeing UFOs as a little kid. I mean, maybe 5, 6 years old, out in Escondido, near San Diego, in the back of my parents' El Camino. Had a little shell on it. And the only thing I can discern what it was at that time as a little kid, it looked like a flying box, like a flying refrigerator. That's the first one I ever saw. And then from there, I've seen like over a dozen.
Wow, I'm a little jealous because I didn't have any sightings. Well, I should say that I don't remember, or that I remember until I got into this field, which turns out to be a thing. I looked it up. If you start investigating this stuff, they will come down. And I think a lot of researchers are truly contactees. And at some point, it happened to me. I remember it was 1986. I got involved in this field.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a while to wrap my head around it. But I was buying the books, I was interviewing people,
mm-hmm.
and I was in the middle of a huge investigation into a wave of sightings over my hometown in Topanga Canyon.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, everything was going on there. Sightings, cars being chased down the road, landings, people being pulled on board, the whole deal. And I was interviewing a lot of people.
Wow, really? How long ago was this? I was out in Redondo. I was living in Redondo Beach.
Oh, well,
back in
close.
2008, I think I was out there. 2009.
Yeah, well, that's a huge hotspot, that whole Santa Catalina Channel area.
Yeah.
I think there's something going on there. But yeah, that was in 1992 to 94.
Oh, okay.
That wave of sightings. But that was when I had probably my first really good sighting. Because I'd seen some stuff. I'd seen ambiguous kind of anomalous lights. And I think they were probably genuine UFOs, but I wasn't ready to call them that because I wanted something that was undeniable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you cannot explain this as a shooting star or something. So what happened was it was late July, 1992. I just left my brother's house, and we'd been talking about UFOs, coincidentally. Well, maybe not. That's all I talked about those days. Still, really. But I was in Woodland Hills,
mm-hmm.
At where he lived, and had just left his house, maybe 3 minutes down the road, and turning this tight hairpin corner, and something caught my eye up above my car through the windshield. And I thought maybe it was a bird, but it came swooping down. And I thought, is that a firecracker? No. Is this a reflection? Because you go through this sort of theory escalation, like what could this possibly be? And what it was an orb, I guess, because it dropped down right in front of my windshield, about a foot away.
Wow.
I mean, you could say 2 feet, but it was over the hood of my car.
How big was it?
Not big. It was about like a golf ball.
Okay.
Maybe a little bigger, but it was glowing. It was lit up, solid edges. And this thing stops right in front of my face. And I had the distinct impression it was looking at me. This was intelligently controlled for sure. This could not have been ball lightning or anything like that at all. Because it stopped, it looked at me, it swept back and forth across my windshield 2-3 times, stopped again, looking at me, and then darted forward, dipped down, and went straight up. And that's when it got super weird because I don't remember anything after that. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember the sighting at all, actually. It completely left my mind until some months later and just kind of popped back in. And I'm like, well, shoot, I had missing time. Took me a while to realize that, but yeah, I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. That was the first of what turned out to be many sightings.
Do you think you were taken?
Yeah, I sure do. I've considered hypnosis, but I'm not sure I completely trust it. I know it works. In the right hands, it absolutely
In the
works.
right hands, yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There's a show called Mythbusters. I don't know if you remember that show, but
I do.
It's a good show where they test theories.
Mm-hmm.
And they tested hypnotic regression in a really clever way. They took their team and didn't tell them, but had someone come running in and fight and cause a ruckus and then go running out. And they said, okay, this is the show. This is the test. Write down what you remember seeing with this guy that just came in seconds ago. And they're like, oh, shoot. And so they all separated and drew him and wrote down everything he said, the clothes he wore, what he looked like, so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said, okay, we're going to put you all under hypnotic regression, see if we can pull out any new details. And damned if they did. You know, they got very clear. One lady, she did not remember seeing any tattoo or anything or what the guy wore. Under hypnosis, she remembered absolutely correctly the tattoo and what he wore, everything about, because she wasn't really paying attention. She was more kind of surprised by the whole ruckus.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they proved it worked. And I know it works because what people remember under hypnosis matches largely what people consciously recall. So I've considered doing it, but I want to remember naturally. A lot of people I've interviewed will suddenly remember. They have a cue, and boom, it all comes back.
Wow. That's your story. Hypnosis, you're talking about these Mythbusters and stuff. Yeah, I would be careful if you decide to do that, but I think you're missing time. Hearing all sorts of cases, I think something happened there, Preston, with you. I think I don't know. You might want to check your body for any little implants or scars or something. Right. You never know.
Well, I have, of course you go to the dentist and stuff. And this is when some people will tell me, oh my God, I went to the dentist and they found something.
Oh,
it hasn't happened to me, not yet, but I hear that all the time. In fact, here's a cool story. One lady from Indiana called me because she was out of her mind with what was going on with her 14-year-old son, who she had taken to the dentist. And the dentist started freaking out, called her into the little operating center there, and showed her the x-rays of her son's mouth. And on this x-ray, which she sent to me, by the way, there was this object, like a marble or a BB, under her son's molar tooth, the back molar tooth, right underneath it. And he's like, what's this? Did your son shoot himself in the mouth with a BB gun, or did he get shot? And the son denied it, and she, of course, denied it. She's like, no, I would have known if my son got shot with a BB. And besides, this thing was bigger than a BB. It was big. And the tooth was asymptomatic. It was fine. There was no entry wound. And the dentist was totally freaked out. He couldn't explain it. He's like, this is a foreign body. I don't know what to tell you. But so she demanded the x-ray. It took some convincing to get it from the doctor, the dentist. And it turned out the previous dentist had seen it but didn't tell her because she found out that x-ray also showed it. So this was around age 13 or 14 that this appeared because earlier x-rays did not show anything. And she asked her son, what's going on? Did anything happen? Do you have any way of explaining this? He's like, well, no, I don't know. And so she's going on the internet trying to figure out what this could be. Is it natural? And the only thing that kept coming up was alien implant everywhere she looked. And that's how she found me because, I'm a UFO researcher. And I'm like, yeah, I asked her, I'm like, do you have any history of encounters? She says, no, not really. I'm like, does he? And she's like, no, I don't think so. I asked him. She sent me the x-rays. I took him to an emergency physician, and a general practitioner. And they're both like, yep, this is a foreign body. It's not natural. It's metallic. Did he shoot himself in the mouth with a BB? And I said, no, he didn't. And so I'm talking to her again. I'm like, yeah, this is what the doctors are saying. That's what it looks like to me. Are you sure that your son doesn't have any history of unusual events?
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't want to talk to me. He's just a kid. But he was there in the room, and I'm talking to her. And so she holds up the phone and says, honey, this guy is asking me again, have you had anything unusual? And he's like, well, yeah, Mom, I did, but I didn't want to scare you.
Uh-oh.
Yep. She's like, honey, what happened? And he said it was right before this thing appeared that he was outside with his friend, and they saw these yellow and blue lights overhead. And they're like, what is that? What could that be? And they're trying to figure it out when this thing drops down 100 feet over their head or so and starts flashing all these other lights, purple and green and red. And they freaked out and ran home. I'm guessing that they were taken at that point, because he then said that's when he started dreaming about Nordic, human-looking ETs.
Oh, okay, the Nordics.
So I kind of like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. And I've come to know, or learn, I think, or suspect, I should say, that when someone is within a couple of 100 feet of one of these things, a UFO, it's probably more than just a sighting. This is when people are contacted. That's when they're taken on board. It's one thing to see something way the heck up there.
Right.
But if it's right down next to you, pay very close attention, because it's coming for you. And she was still out of her mind with this. She's like, oh my God, this is an alien implant. What does this mean? I reassured her as best as I could and told her what I'd learned about these things. I don't think they're really for tracking, which is what a lot of people suspect. From what I've been told by contactees, it's really more health related. It monitors your health, your vital signs, boosts your immune system, measures the level of pollution in your body. This is what people have been told, at least, by the ETs. And so I'm telling her all this, and I'm like, chances are there's going to be more incidents. And sure enough, it wasn't long after that, she called me up. She's like, it happened last night. I'm like, okay, calm down. What happened? And her son had a lot of trouble sleeping. He had insomnia, could only sleep with the lights on. This often happens to people who are just having contact. It kind of freaks them out a little bit. So he had come into her room to sleep, and she woke up because there were these weird colored lights in the room. And the next thing she knows, there's this gray standing in the open doorway. He had the door open and the hall light on, and she could see his silhouette. And she's like, Preston, this thing, it came up to the doorknob. It was that short. I'm like, okay.
Wow.
And she looked over at her son, and there was two grays on either side of the bed. And they were working on him. And she said she started getting telepathy in her mind. And they were saying, oh, it's okay. You don't have to worry. Everything's fine. We're not hurting him. You're okay. He's okay. Everything's fine. Don't worry. Over and over again. Mm-hmm. And she said it was actually really reassuring. The fear left her. And at some point she fell back asleep. And she wakes up the next morning. She's like, honey, guess what? Mm-hmm. The Greys came. And he's like, really? They came for you? And she's like, no, honey, they came for you. He's like, oh, I wonder if my implant's still there. And they were due to go to the dentist, in 2 weeks. But she was really happy, actually. She's like, Preston, I got the answer I was looking for. I know it's going to be okay. And they went to the dentist, and it was still there. And one of the dental assistants was so freaked out, she had to go home. She started crying. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. And they took a second x-ray, and it disappeared. It was gone. Now, this can happen. These things can move around. And that freaked the dentist up, so much. She's like, I'm going to give you a free third x-ray. because her insurance only covers 2 x-rays.
Right.
And the 3rd x-ray showed it there. And she sent me those, and they're marked. You can see it was within 3 minutes these x-rays were taken, one after another. And the first one shows it, the second one doesn't, and the 3rd one does. And she's like, Preston, how can this be?
Right.
I'm like, well, this happens. These things can move around in your body. I don't know how it's being done. I don't know the mechanics behind it. But yeah, she ended up having another encounter where she was pulled on board and saw a praying mantis ET.
Oh no. And
that's when she remembered, she did have experiences in the past. It started coming back to her. And she's like, what is this all about? Why my son? I'm like, well, tell me about him. What's he like? And she's like, well, actually, he's really special. He's super psychic. Mm-hmm. I'm like, really? She's like, oh, yeah, daily. He has precognition and clairvoyance, and he's just an amazing kid. Really smart. And that rang a bell for me because this is what we do see. That is a pattern with contactees. They are really psychic. And I think the ETs are drawn to that because these are people who are woken up. They're really advanced. So I don't know, but it's a pattern that turns up quite a bit.
That's interesting. Tying those dots together.
Yeah, I see it. Now that's a question I always ask. Any other psychic experiences? Mm-hmm. And always, almost without exception, people are like, oh yeah, I'm a medium, or I have seen ghosts my whole life, mm-hmm. or I levitated when I was a kid, or I can do healing, or I have astral projection, out-of-body experiences. That one I love because when I started investigating UFOs, I started having out-of-body experiences in a crazy way, just over and over. My family thought I was losing my mind. I'm like, guess what? UFOs are real. And they're like, stop talking about UFOs. I'm like, well, guess what? I'm also going out of my body. They're like, you've lost your mind.
What did you see?
Oh,
out of body.
First going out of body, just, wandering around the house and stuff. Occasionally you would see spirits. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it took me a while to learn how to do it. I pursued it. I found a book on how to do it. Mm-hmm. And learned how to walk through walls. And as I got better at it, I could visit friends' houses or, family who lived further away than, where I was living. And finally, my mom had passed away some years earlier. And that's kind of what inspired me to do it. I wanted to find out if there was life after death. Mm-hmm. I wanted to know where the heck she was. And one day she appeared right in front of me. And I couldn't believe it. Because, she had gray hair when she died, of course, and wrinkles. And she was 49, not terribly old,
right.
But definitely older than I was. But she looked my age. I mean, I couldn't believe it. She looked so young. And she grabbed me by the arm and, long story short, took me to the other side, or what I think we would call the other side, and gave me basically a tour of, I'm not a religious guy really, but I don't know what else to call them, the heavenly realms. Mm-hmm. Because it was great. I mean, it was so beautiful there. I know there's life after death because I've been there, I've done it, and I've done it a lot since then. We had many, many meetings and still do. So that's become a huge part of my life. And I think that's true with a lot of contactees. They have this sort of thing. So, yeah, on some level, I think I got pulled into this. And as an investigator, when I go ghost hunting, because I've done that, I want to see the ghost. When I started learning about out-of-body experiences, I'm like, well, apparently you can do this.
So you've seen ghosts?
I have. Yeah, absolutely. The first time was after my mom passed away, and I saw her, full color apparition. Now, I will say I didn't believe in ghosts when I saw her. So I thought, well, I'm just losing my mind. I'm hallucinating. There's no such thing as ghosts.
Right.
And I watched her kind of pixelate away into nothingness. I'm like, wow, that was weird. And no one else saw her. I was standing right next to people and no one seemed to see her. So I thought, all right. But after I got into ghosts and really started researching it, I would go to these haunted houses. And I think one of the, I've had little things, like being poked in the armpit once. That made me jump.
Yeah.
I jumped.
Yeah, poked in the armpit, man.
Like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And I had my hair tugged once or twice. But that was minor compared to going over to this one house where there was some poltergeist activity, right? The daughter was seeing little sparkly lights and stuff and misty forms, and there was occasional doors closing and lights going on and off. It was relatively minor, though. But I'm in there in the living room, and the kitchen is, this is not an open floor plan. There was a kitchen which was somewhat cut off. Mm-hmm. There was a peninsula, I guess, right. A counter that stretched out, which blocked some of the kitchen, but in the cabinets, you could see into the kitchen. And all of a sudden, there's this huge crash, and it sounded like one of those cartoon explosions.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, with
right.
Explosion and pots banging, glass breaking, and little springs going off, doing, 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 tinkling. I mean, there was every sound in the book all at once, and it was weirdly. I won't say muffled, but it ended awfully quick. Because it exploded and there's all this glass breaking and banging and ringing and rumbling. And she looked at me, the mother, and I looked at her, and I went running into the kitchen within 2 seconds. I mean, right when the sound stopped, I was there. And there wasn't a bloody thing out of place. She keeps a very clean house. First thing I did was open the pantry, because that was a closed door. Open the refrigerator, I opened all the cabinets. I'm looking. There was nothing out of place. And I loved that because I'd heard other people describe it. Like, I don't even know how to describe this, but there's these weird explosions. And I'm like, well, I get it now because I heard it. That was one of my best. But I did see other stuff. I mean, one time I went to this house where a lady was, oh God, what do you call it? Table tipping. Have you heard of that? Table lifting.
Yeah, you might want to identify that for the listeners.
Yeah, this is sort of like a Ouija board, but you use a little table, usually a little table, like a card table. You put your hands on the surface lightly as possible, and it's usually a little circle of people, and you contact spirits. You call out to them and say, are there spirits here? And the table will rise up or get up on two legs. And it was my sister-in-law who was working at a t-shirt factory who had met this lady who could do this. And I'm like, can I come over? I want to see this. And she's like, sure, come on over. And I did. And, I was watching these four people around this little card table, and I was skeptical because it was a pretty light table. And I'm thinking to myself, I could take that table and just lean it up with my fingers, is what I'm thinking, right?
Right.
So I'm like, can I have a turn? I want to turn. And I had my compass, I had all my little gear, camera and so forth. And I sit down with two other people and the medium, Donna was her name. And it's like, hey, are there any spirits here? And sure enough, that table rose right up on two legs. And I knew instantly that this was not anyone doing it, because you can just kind of tell when their fingers are sliding all over the place. But I wanted to be sure. So I'm like, would you guys mind if it's just me and the medium doing it? And they're like, that's fine. Because, I was doing my scientific experiment.
You had everything there, all the gadgets.
Right? So she, let me see. I didn't have my hands on the table. I wanted to see if she could do it by herself. And she did. I'm like, can you do it with one hand? And she did. I'm like, would you try it with just one finger? And have it lean, not towards you or to the side, but towards me. Because this would indicate that, she's not pressing down.
Right.
And sure enough, it did. And then I did it by myself. Nobody on it. And that table wouldn't go up, but it shook like the dickens. And there was something in that table. And believe me, I inspected that table for magnets or anything.
Right.
And we ended up experimenting with it and trying to get it to levitate. But we got that darn thing to run across the room.
Really? Wow.
Oh, the craziest thing. And I'm like, levitate, levitate. I wanted it to come full way up off the floor. And what it did is it walked itself over to the staircase that went down and leaned over the edge of the downward staircase so that it was essentially levitating. It was horizontal and just floating there. And then it came right back up. It's very cool because each time we'd call a spirit, it would act a little different. Mm-hmm. There was like a grandma, and it would be very smooth and gracious and fluid. And then there would be like a young spirit who died of suicide, and it would bang and be really abrupt. So I don't know what we were talking to. She ended up not doing it because she had a fire start in her kitchen.
Oh, wow.
Which could not have started. And she had a weird clicking noise that was going through the house. And I will say, because I went back there quite a few times. Mm-hmm. One time I left there and I'm driving home thinking, wow, that was amazing. And some force hit my car so hard.
Whoa.
Started rocking all over. I mean, I almost got pushed off the road. And I told people about it. My brother's like, oh, you probably hit some gasoline or an oil slick. I'm like, no, something hit my car. And I didn't see anything, but I know what I felt. And I nearly got pushed off the road. It scared the daylights out of me.
That's crazy. That's
so, yeah, I recommend it.
Wow.
She knew, we did meditations and white light and everything we could to protect ourselves. But honestly, you don't know what's coming through them.
No, you don't. You do not. I was, a few months ago, I was backing out of the parking lot at the grocery store. And I was in reverse and something just pushed the car back forward. Boom. Just a big bang, like what the heck was that? My daughter was with me. She looked at me. I looked at her like I looked, because you have a rear view camera. I was looking at the camera right away like, well, there's nobody back there. I hit a car and something just stopped me and pushed the car forward.
Wow.
That was wild. And this was after like, you know what, President, getting into these podcasts, speaking to, various guests, I knew for a fact that things like this were going to start happening around me. These paranormal, you can't identify what they are, but there's something out there. And when my car was pushed, I was in reverse and it just pushed me forward. And it didn't feel like I hit a car, hit something solid. It was more like something was like a bumper car type of effect. It wasn't like a blunt blow. It was like a I don't know, like a rubbery blow. It just pushed me back forward. It was strange.
Yeah, I worked with this girl, Claudia, and she had some interesting UFO experiences, but ghosts as well. She's like, I have this ghost that follows me around. I call it my poltergeist. Everyone in my family knows it. And she says, here's something weird. She says, every time I drive by a graveyard or anyone who's died, the ghost follows me home. Because, this is something mediums deal with.
Right.
And she's driving by this car accident. She saw some guy, under a blanket. He had died. And she's like, oh, no. And sure enough, things were moving all over the place in the house after that. Because if you're a medium, ghosts can see it. You have a light. This is kind of my theory from having read a lot of books on this and interviewed a lot of people. They can realize when people are mediums and can communicate with them. And they are drawn to you like a moth to a flame. And I've talked to other mediums who've had this problem. So, including Dolly, she talks about it, who I mentioned earlier, and subject of the book Symmetry. She's got these abilities. And she's talked about this as well. She, Claudia always avoids graveyards because of this.
Oh, I bet. They're all drawn to that, to these mediums, these people that have that ability. That's very strange. And in your research, do you find that some of these entities are malevolent?
In terms of spirits, oh yeah, you know, some of these earthbound spirits, especially, are earthbound for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
They're very angry. They're perhaps addicted. They're attached to their home, or they've got drug problems, or they're just plain
Nasty.
bad people,
Yeah.
murderers and thieves and thugs and so forth. Absolutely, yeah. Some of them are malevolent, and some are probably even beyond that, inhuman spirits. There was a ghost case I was doing with these haunted apartments in Van Nuys on Kester Avenue.
Okay. Van Nuys.
This is in the heart of Van Nuys. And these were these two young ladies who had met at work and decided that they were going to get an apartment together. And they found this one that was really cheap, extraordinarily cheap. Like, wow, how did we lucked out on this one?
Right.
Well, maybe not. Turned out to be a retirement building, and people were just dropping dead in that building all the time, she said. The ambulance was there more often than not, carting people away. So they're in, I forget what apartment it was, apartment 16, I think it was. And right away, as soon as they move in, they start hearing this thumping on the wall. And they're like, this darn neighbor is throwing a tennis ball. Thump, 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 all night long. And finally they complained to the apartment manager, and they're like, this guy, you got to tell him to stop playing with a tennis ball. He's keeping us up. And she said, listen, he moved out because he thought it was you thumping on the wall. And they're like, oh, shoot. And that's when it ramped up. They started having lights going on and off. They turned on the water. This was a weird thing, which I've heard in one other case. The water went out sideways,
Whoa.
straight down. And they had, explosions in the kitchen, pots and pans banging. They'd go out there, all the cupboards would be open. It just started escalating, real cold spots in the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
They brought their friend over to set up their stereo. And he started looking in the hallway and turned white and got really nervous and started working faster. And they're like, what's wrong? He's like, nothing. And he quickly set up the stereo. He's like, I'm going. And they're like, don't you want to stay and have dinner? We'll get some drinks. And he's like, no, I'm going. Bye. And they called him up. They're like, what's the deal? What happened? And he's like, well, I saw lemurs in your apartment. And they're like, lemurs? What do you mean? He's like, they're these big-eyed things, and I see ghosts, and I see them when there are bad spirits around. And they're like, oh, shoot, because they had been having problems. And so it just got worse and worse and worse, right? And then they're laying in bed one day. They had a giant king-size bed. They both slept in it. And it was a one-bedroom apartment. And they started seeing these apparitions, which were black, absolutely pitch black, running by the doorway. And one day they came into the doorway, stood there, and came into the room and attacked one of them and pinned her to the bed and moved inside of her.
What?
Yeah. Now, I interviewed both of them.
Whoa, man.
Trish and Kim were their names. And Trish is screaming because her friend Kim is pinned to the bed, and she can see her being pressed down physically. I mean, the mattress is being depressed.
That sounds like sleep paralysis. That people, they describe it as being, pressed down. You can't move. That's crazy.
Yeah, but it's beyond that because, I've had sleep paralysis. I've interviewed people about it. I've looked deeply into it. She was being physically pressed down into the mattress, and her friend could see it happening. And she said she couldn't breathe. She was paralyzed. And in her mind, she saw the spirit, and it was like an ugly woman with really stringy hair and big black pits for eyes and missing teeth. And it was just a ghoul, a really super ugly figure. And finally, she started praying. They're not religious, but they started praying because they didn't know what else to do.
Hey, when it comes to that point, man, Jesus Christ, where are you?
Right. And finally it lifted up, and they tried everything to get rid of this thing. They looked up online, use salt. So they bought a pound of salt and they covered the floors with salt. Every service. That didn't work. They tried prayers, sacred masks, anything. And that's it. We're moving out.
Right.
And it followed them for a little bit. It had a little bit of activity. And the other girl, Trish, moved out. And Kim, last I heard, she had been attacked again and pinned down and the whole deal.
Wow. That's the hitchhiker effect. These things follow you.
Yep.
They attach.
Yep, probably.
That's scary.
I've investigated a lot of haunting cases. And some are really benevolent. It's, grandma coming and here's the will. One guy got a bunch of money.
Really?
Yeah. It turns out that there was a will and they hadn't found it. It was in the bookcase. It was your classic sort of story like that. Another was about an inheritance. Some really friendly ghost stories. But some, no. There was a guy, Whitney Wright was his name, who lived up in Wildwood. I think that's in Northern California.
Mm-hmm.
And he had this ghost following him around since he was a kid. And he thought maybe it was the girl who had drowned next door, but he thought maybe it was just masquerading as that. And he said it happened all the time, and whenever anyone was a skeptic and came over, that would definitely bring it out. And it would scare the daylights out of his friends who stopped coming over. But he had a good friend, Paul Delgado, and he started playing with the ghost, or like calling on it. And Whitney's like, don't do that. This thing is not nice. You're making a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
But Paul wanted to play around with it. And what he did is this cold spot appeared and he started walking through it. He's like, oh man, I get a rush when I walk through this thing. Try it. Whitney's like, I'm not doing that. And he followed this cold spot around the room that night, right? So they go to bed. Whitney's in bed and Paul's sleeping at the foot of the bed on the floor. And in the middle of the night, footsteps come in and they're walking all around the room. And Paul starts talking to it. He's like, come to me, come to me. And when he said, don't do that. And then bam, same thing. Paul is pinned to the floor. He can't get up. He's screaming. And Whitney goes to help him and can't lift him off the floor. He's a dead weight. And not only that, Paul is speaking in this foreign language, really creepy, kind of like speaking in tongues. It scared the daylights out of him. And then Paul attacks him, actually scarred him up pretty bad on his face.
Sounds like possession.
Yeah, it moved all the way to that stage for sure.
Wow.
Because these will progress to that. And they'll pick on you. And if you call on them, don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then Paul snaps out of it. And you know what? He didn't remember a thing. Didn't remember any of it. All he remembered was going to bed that night. It's crazy.
That's when he hit the trance state. Do you have any follow-ups on them? Is he still having these trance states? And
last I heard, Paul got the lesson and stopped doing it. And Whitney says, yeah, I could, I haven't talked to them in years, I will say, but he's like, I know I could call it if I wanted to, because I did it. I've done it many times, but I'm not doing it. So he's probably a medium, I think. So I should look him up, see if, he's doing that kind of work, because sometimes that's what happens. That happened to a guy in England who had one of the worst poltergeist cases in English history. And he's now a major healer and medium. I forget what his name, Matthew Manning. That's right. That's his name. His case is real famous. So I think that's what was going on there. But yeah, the ghost cases are crazy. I've got several just like that.
That's wild. That's a lot of good information there. What's your take? I was thinking about this right now. What's your take between the differences of extraterrestrials, the grays, the little ones, the taller ones, the blonde hair, blue eyes, the insectoids? What's your feeling on all these things?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked it, because I've looked into that because that was my question too. How many are there? They're all humanoid. They've all got arms and legs,
Right.
bipedal, and they've got a face, and some look just like us. The human-looking ones, Nordics often called. But even the praying mantis, are not that far removed from us. I've mostly get grays, some variation of it, all the way from 3 foot, ones that are probably AI, artificial intelligence, or I don't want to say robots, but kind of synthetic.
Right.
Because they can be turned off and on. Dolly Saffron talks about this, and I've had other people talk about it as well. Whitley Strieber talked about that. So these short little kind of robotic ones that aren't really alive as we would think of it, but there's short ones as well that are alive and emotional. Mid-sized grays, tall grays, every variation of grays you could think of in terms of skin tone and shapes of eyes. And all the same variation we see here with us. So that's a huge category. But as well, there'd be little short blue beings. It's funny because my sister-in-law saw those.
Oh, right. Yeah. Didn't Whitley Strieber mention little blue ones?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And if you see his movie Communion, there's a representation of them there.
Yeah, like little monsters.
Yeah. Like little trolls.
Right.
And my sister-in-law is an artist, very accomplished. She does the work for me on my books. And I'm like, draw what you saw. Because people are always drawing little cartoon figures of what they saw in them. But she's an artist. So she drew this amazing illustration. So now when anyone's like, I don't know how to describe them, but they were boxy little things with flat faces and blue skin, and they looked kind of troll-like. I'm like, I got a picture to show you. And tell me if this is what you saw. And sure enough, you should see their faces when they or hear their reaction. Like, oh my God, that is absolutely what I saw. And it's funny, I've had her draw grays too. She'll sit down with the witness and draw what they saw. And the person starts shaking and crying, like, oh my God. So yeah, grays, little blue beings, tall whites.
Yeah, what's the deal with the tall whites and the Nordics? They sound similar. There was that guy, that military guy, Ranger Harry or something like that out in Nevada, the tall whites, and then you have the Pleiadians, the Nordics. What's the difference in your research? Have you looked into that?
Yeah, there's difference in appearance. The tall whites are quite tall, obviously. 7 feet tall, even taller, and very slender, very human looking in a lot of ways, but very pale skin and usually blue eyes, green eyes, often. That there's variation on that. But what I've learned, and this is from talking to the contactees and many who have asked the ETs themselves about it or were told, and the main message they get in terms of that is, we are you, you are us, we are all one. It's some variation of that, but often that exact phrasing, literally that exact sentence, I've heard that at least 10 times from people. So what I've learned is, the grays are human. They have the same genetics. All of these guys have the same genetics. We all share a common heritage, but just have dialed out a little bit differently, depending on our environment or our history of where, our, I don't want to even call it race, because we're all the same race. We really are. And I think our governments know this. I think they've got the bodies and have done the research to prove this.
Right.
But yeah, they're all humanoid. And I think this absolutely is kind of complemented by the fact that we do see these guys who look just like us. Where are they coming from? Clearly not Earth. And how could they look just like us? Did we even evolve here? What's our relationship with these guys? And if the grays are interbreeding with us, and they are, because that is something I hear very regularly.
Why? Why would they want to, in your opinion, because we get that a lot, that women are taken, men are taken, sperm extracted, ova, etc., fetuses are taken, and what I find striking is it's generally against the person's will that this is happening. What do you, in your research, in your opinion, what do you think is the cause of this? Why are they doing this to people and frightening them?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure that they are intentionally frightening them, and I'm not convinced it's against a person's will. I will say people have told me that who've had this experience, that they felt that. And a good number of them had called me up and said, you know what? I've changed my mind. I think I did agree to this.
Oh, wow.
Which is this is a point of contention in this field for sure. It's controversial. And what I've learned is this pattern, when it starts, it's scary as all get out. I mean, people are losing their minds over this. They're having PTSD. They're frightened. They're having nightmares. Insomnia. Can't sleep unless the lights are on.
Right.
But yeah, this is happening. And I think we do know why, because people have been told. And I've got case after case of this. The story varies slightly, but it's generally along the lines of the Greys have suffered genetic damage due to gamma radiation from traveling out in space and have lost the ability or had this damaged, hindered to reproduce. And they're reinvigorating their DNA and pulling back some of the things that they've lost. And they do not do this against a person's will. The problem is people don't remember that.
Yeah, there's something going on there. That's something that they, like you're saying, they probably asked for it.
Yeah, well, I think so. This is the pattern I've certainly seen. And here's why I think some people are like, I did not agree to this. When Greys come into your room.
And you get that a lot. You get that a lot on podcasts. People are, right? Yeah.
Scared the living daylights out of you.
Right.
And you find yourself on a craft and you're fighting them the whole way. You're going to interpret this as a negative experience. And you're probably not going to remember a lot of it, because the last thing they want to do is cause harm or fear. And so that's when a person decides not to remember. Because there was one kid, he's like, they were really surprised he remembered. And they said, well, most people, they just don't want to remember. And it's not us doing it, it's them. And there's a sort of a misconception, I think, in this field that the Greys are the one who are taking people's memory away. When talking with Dolly and other people who are fully conscious, no, it's a cooperative effort. People decide they don't want to remember. So when that happens, people are compartmentalizing the whole thing. It's hidden away. They don't remember. Not remembering all the good stuff, all the talks with these ETs, being given a tour of the craft, going up to the observation deck, all the good stuff, which eventually does come around. The vast majority of people I've talked to after their third, fourth experience of being taken on board turn around. I'm like, okay, I'm fine. They healed me. They taught me all this. They showed me the moon. They showed me the Saturn. They showed me the Earth far down below. And most people I talked to, I'd said, I wouldn't trade this for anything. This is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. But yeah, we compartmentalize. So when someone's saying, oh, I didn't agree to this. Right. Well, when Greys come in and they're saying, no, there's a part of them that's saying, okay, here you are again. I'm ready. And this is what we would call the subconscious, which isn't what people think it is. Right. We have a much greater, it's hard to describe, but we compartmentalize our consciousness into little pieces. And we're all absolutely aware when we're sleeping and we're having out-of-body experiences and going on the other side. And we don't remember it. We're almost like half human beings walking around with amnesia. We should be remembering our past lives. We should be remembering everything that goes on at night. And this is who ET is talking to. They're talking to all of you that did agree to this. I think that's the simplest way I can put it. And my heart goes out to people who are having a hard time with this, and I totally get it. It's not easy, especially in the beginning, but I have no cases of what I would call sadistic behavior of ETs going, "Muha, muha, I'm going to hurt you." or, or torture or any of the
Right.
heinous things that we do to each other. I mean, and this is the problem. We're imposing our own culture onto them. Stranger danger. We are hurting each other. So when someone different comes into our room, we automatically assume this is a bad thing. And it's not. And you can see this if you take an objective look at the onboard experience. Sorry, I'm kind of going off on this, but I get really I'm vehement about it because
No, it's good. It's good.
There's a lot of fear surrounding the subject, and there's some flat out disinformation. I mean, there's liars in this field, government agents, MyLabs, military abductions, where they are torturing people.
I've heard about that military stuff.
Yeah, and they're saying it's ETs, and I'm like, no, it's not. And I would just point to other major researchers like Barbara Lamb, or John Mack, or Edith Fiore, or Timothy Good, who have come to the same conclusions I have. Like, this is not so bad. Get over the fear, and you will see they're not here to hurt you. It's the opposite, actually. Their agenda is to heal. That's why people are being pulled on board and physically examined. It's a healing procedure. And it's to guide, it's to teach, it's to warn. If anyone gets a message of any kind beyond, don't be afraid, we won't hurt you, you're fine, how can we stop you from screaming, what's wrong, you're okay, it will be something along the lines of, you need to tell people to stop putting out the greed and negativity you're putting out. You're going to destroy your planet. Nuclear proliferation, you're on the way to destroying yourselves. You need to tell your leaders to stop doing this. Stop pollution, right. Your warlike ways. You're cutting down the forests. Your air is polluted. Do not eat that food. It is poisonous. There's pesticides. This is what they're telling people over and over and over again, whether it's grays, human-looking praying mantis, short blue beings, tall whites.
The blue ones.
That's the message. And you can't tell me that this is negative. There are people who I've interviewed. Every now and then I'll interview someone who's just, I hate this, they're demonic. I'm like, can I ask if you are religious? And they're like, yeah, very religious, and these are demons. I'm like, well, let's dig deep with this. What exactly happened to you? And a few are like, you know what, don't talk to me, this is demonic, this is what I know it is. But that's 1 out of 100, right. Literally. And I've, as you know, as we've been talking about, I've looked into the whole demonic thing. This is not a demonic thing. That is a separate phenomena that is real.
Right.
But it's not ET. It's just not. And I think if you look at the onboard experience and step away from what you think you know about it and just objectively look at it, you'll see that this is actually a really good thing.
Yeah, some people are getting more in tune with the news and what's coming out now, and why the government continues to hide something that's obvious. Got so many reports now of people encountering these beings, and just like we were talking earlier, just recently, that the young man and his family in Nevada, they had something land in their backyard, and it got to the point, I guess, in their lives that they're being inundated so much with news reporters and curious people that they just went dark. They don't want to talk about it anymore, and that's unfortunate. I'm
hoping that, because I don't trust half the reporting or most of it that's coming out
of course.
That case, because I'm seeing some CGI stuff, and I'm like, I don't know if this is legit, and unless it's fully investigated, I'm gonna sort of not comment on it.
Kind of reserve, huh? Kind of reserve your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to, see a panel of all of them, and the parents, the kids, the police.
They need to talk about it, Preston. They need to come out, and they started this. They need to come out and sit down, and if they're having stress and anxiety attacks, well, you know what? It's not going to go away. You started this. You need to come out and talk about it.
Yeah, and if it's a hoax, let us know.
Exactly. Exactly. What
I'm skeptical, honestly.
Yeah.
Just as a researcher, I have to be.
In your research with these Nordic type of beings, did you ever come across, you mentioned their features, their eyes and their hair. What about their hands? Are their hands normal? Do they have 5 fingers, 8 fingers, 10 fingers? I mean,
that's a great question, because I've never heard of, it runs a narrow gamut, right? The least number of fingers per hand is 3. And we see that with some of the grays.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty rare. Usually it's 4, sometimes 5, and occasionally with some of I think it's the tall whites, might have 6 fingers.
Okay.
But I've never heard of anyone with more than 6 fingers per hand or less than 3. So, some people will describe claw-like hands with the praying mantis in particular, which you would expect.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, actually, the Navy medic who I mentioned who'd seen the 15-foot tall praying mantis did describe sort of claw-like hands.
I was talking with, did an interview with Ron Moorhead, and he feels that extraterrestrials are connected with Bigfoot.
Yeah. Well, I've looked into that because I got my first case, a couple of years in, and I had, of course, heard of Bigfoot by that point. And I'm like, God, what if it's real? I don't want to go there. This is going to be a can of worms. I'm not even going to look into Bigfoot for now, because I was having enough with ghosts and ETs and out-of-body experiences and levitation. I mean, this is a big pill to swallow. Right. I can see why people remain skeptical, because they're like, you got to be kidding me. Telepathy but long story short, I got this case from Robert Murphy was his name, a radiologist from Canyon Country.
Okay.
And if you know Canyon Country, this was back in the 70s. It was a pretty rural area, and it borders on the LA National Forest.
Ron Moorhead's time.
Yeah. This is like 500,000 acres of wilderness area. It's big. People don't realize there's a vast wilderness area right outside of LA. So that's where he lived. And I later looked it up. Lots of Bigfoot reports there. He didn't know that. I didn't know that. And he had this experience where he was in his house and he saw lights in the backyard. Mm-hmm. And so he runs out onto his patio, and this thing is landing in his backyard. Blue and white lights, a craft of some kind. He couldn't really tell. He didn't have his glasses on. He's nearsighted. But it's totally silent. It's just 200 yards away or so. I mean, it's right on the edge of his yard there, and it's wilderness out there. There's nothing. So he runs to get his glasses, and this thing takes off. He's like, darn it. This thing is, he wanted to get a closer look. And it was the next night, his dogs start losing their minds. They're just barking up a storm. And he goes out on the patio, and he gets this telepathic link up to this Bigfoot. And I'm like, you're kidding me, because I hadn't heard of this, right? But now, having researched Bigfoot, telepathy comes into play with a lot of these Bigfoot. People will describe a telepathic hookup. I'm like, damn, I did not know this. Right. So I'm just kind of reserving my judgment and letting the witness talk. And so this thing roared really loudly for about 15 to 30 seconds, and it echoed in his chest. He's like, listen, I've heard there. We've got wildcats. I've heard them. This wasn't that. And he said it was really mad about the dogs. And that's what it was thinking, because he could hear it thinking, and he felt it could hear him. And so it shook him up, because it roared again, and it was pretty close. So he's corralling his dogs and getting back inside. Goes out there the next day and does see footprints. It was pretty hard-packed soil, so he couldn't really tell. But it was shortly after that he had a poltergeist outbreak in his house. And he's like, yeah, my sister is psychic, and she does have a lot of stuff going on, but this was wild, because there was lights going, the whole gamut of manifestations. And I think that speaks to that. That was my first sort of Bigfoot paranormal UFO case. But I got others, and so I started collecting reports, and I did a whole write-up on one of my books. Because I found like 40 cases.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and these are no joke, absolutely connected, because a person is seeing a UFO land and a Bigfoot comes running out of the forest at the same time. And there's a couple of cases where people saw the Bigfoot coming out of the craft, or in the craft, or right next to the grays. And not just one or two. I mean, we're talking a good number of cases. And this was so confusing to me because having researched Bigfoot, and actually had my own Bigfoot encounter at one point.
Oh, you did? Wow.
I did.
Man.
Researching it, I went, because this lady was having encounters, but I don't want to get off on a tangent. But most people who see Bigfoot aren't going to see a UFO, and vice versa, because people are being taken on board all the time. There's no Bigfoot, but there's a bunch of cases where they're together, and it's intersecting perfectly. I couldn't figure out what's going on, because I don't think Bigfoot is an alien. If you research the subject of Bigfoot, it goes back hundreds of years, and they live on this planet, no doubt. The Native Americans have a long oral tradition of it.
Oh, yes.
Of course, there's the Yeti and the skunk ape in Florida and wild man and the Yowie in Australia. They're all across the planet. They're everywhere and have been there for hundreds upon hundreds of years, and probably longer than that. So, and I think they're intelligent, and I think they've got abilities too.
I do too.
I'm not sure that all of them are sentient, maybe, but I talked to one guy. He's like, this darn thing appeared in front of me, didn't run out of the forest. It came out of thin air and started talking to him and said, yes, we have the ability to turn invisible, and not telepathically. And that's when the mother Bigfoot appeared and the baby Bigfoot. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. He's like, no, I swear it was in a creek bed. It was up in the Sierras. And then it disappeared. And I started getting other cases like that. So, yeah, I think that they do have abilities. And that's why we don't see more of them. That's why it's really hard to get photographs of them, because they can smell you coming, they can hear you coming, and they can hear you thinking. So if they want to show themselves, they can, but if they don't, you're not going to see them. And I think what we're looking at is that some of these guys are in contact with ETs, just like some people are. And I don't know, it's just a theory, I can't prove it. It sounds crazy. Bigfoot contactee. But
well, you never know. Yeah.
I don't know how else to explain these cases.
No, it's we can only discern what we get from other people, and your stories and Ron Moorhead, they make a lot of sense. That there's some connection. When Ron Moorhead was up in the Sierras, he saw like I don't know, it sounds funny, but it says it looked like something like a lightsaber floating across the forest. It's weird stuff, just a bunch of weird stuff. Yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Because I had my own encounter, as I mentioned, this lady in Acton, which is on the other side of the LA National Forest, sort of in the high desert there, or the low desert, I don't know what, it was the desert area.
It's desert.
Palmdale, Lancaster, Acton, that area. And she had bought this house right off the 14 freeway. I mean, it was 2 miles off the 14 freeway, which is heavily traveled. She's like, you got to come over. I think Bigfoot's trying to kidnap me. They don't do that, do they? I'm like, no, they don't kidnap people. I was still new to Bigfoot research. Did not realize that, yeah, they do. There are cases. And I was buying books at that point, and I'm like, got to tell you, that does happen. So don't necessarily go out at night if you think it's coming for you, because, yeah, that does happen. And she was a young, attractive woman, And she said it was coming around her house at night. She had a roommate. He saw it. She had a 5-year-old son. He saw it as well. He's like, monkey man on the tree outside. It broke this thick branch. I went over and I saw it. That branch had been broken. She showed me what looked like footprints. She said it screams like a woman being murdered out in the wash. And if you know your Bigfoot stories, yeah, they can vocalize in all kinds of ways, and it sounds like a high-pitched scream. And so I'm going to her house and I'm interviewing her, and she's like, I know where it lives. I'm pretty sure I know where this thing is coming from, because she says it was reading her mind, and she was reading it. I'm like, oh God, here we go again.
Mm-hmm.
And before I get to that, though, she had this one other story. She saw it through the window one night. Her roommate did, but she heard this big clunk on the roof. This big, sort of something landing on the roof. And she's like, I'm not going outside. And waited till morning, because she says it stunk bad.
Mm.
She said it stunk. The description she gave was so funny. I don't know if it's okay to swear, but yes. She used swear words. She said it smelled like crap. I'll use that word. Dirty sneakers or dirty socks, vomit, death, and rotting garbage all mixed together in body odor. She said it was really bad. And so she goes out the next morning after hearing this clunk on the roof and can't believe her eyes. There is this boulder up on top of her roof, which is high up. You know, houses are a minimum of 10 feet up, 12 feet. So whatever put that up there had to be enormous and very strong. And so she called over some neighbors, and it took 3 guys to lift this thing and get it off of her roof. And if you know Bigfoot, they're all about rock throwing.
Right.
This is very common primate behavior, in fact. So that fit in exactly. She knows nothing about Bigfoot. I went through her whole house just checking, you know, for books and stuff.
Right.
She's very sincere. She was wide-eyed. I mean, she was scared. She's like, it's trying to get me. I'm like, I think you'll be okay. She's like, I know where it lives. I could take you there. I'm like, you're kidding. She's like, no. I'll show you exactly where it lives. I know it lives in this canyon just a couple of miles from my house. I know it's coming from there. I can hear it thinking. And so we did. And, you know, we wanted to capture some footage, right? So we got cameras and sound equipment with little parabolas and very sensitive microphones. And we drive out there. And it's just a few miles from her house down this dirt road, which is a little treacherous, but you don't need a 4-wheel drive. And we got there around dusk because that's when it starts to come out. They're basically nocturnal. And it was, I mean, their stars were not out yet, but they were about to. And she's pulling this equipment out of the back seat, right? And I got out of the front seat, and I'm standing in front of the car surveilling the area. Right. She's pointing to the ravine, and I'm looking at it, and it's, you know, just a couple hundred yards away from us, but it goes straight down at a 45-degree angle, straight up at a 45-degree angle, and it's thick with chaparral and brush and pine, little scrub pine, you know, not too big, but you couldn't hike there if you wanted. There's just no way. So she's pulling out the equipment, and I'm surveilling the area when I hear this roar. And it shook me because it was loud. And my first thought was a plane, a jet, was swooping down, though I knew instantly it wasn't.
Wow, that's loud.
There was no plane, and it didn't sound like that. It sounded like the roar of nothing I've ever heard before. And, you know, I love animals. I've been to the zoo. I was right next to a lion at the zoo when it roared. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but brought tears to my eyes. I mean, it shook your chest. It sort of rumbles in a way you don't expect. And it reminded me of that, but it was different. It was very low tones and very high-pitched tones at the same time. And it went on for like 10 full seconds, echoing in your chest. And she freezes. And I'm like, oh my God, where's that coming from? And I'm trying to triangulate it, you know, because it's kind of just sweeping over you. Right. And it stopped, and it's dead quiet at this point. And she's shaking, and it roars again. And now I know where it's coming from because I can hear it. And it's not far. It's right in that ravine on the close side, right? And I start running towards it because I want to see it, right? Right. And she's like, she just lets out this blood-curdling scream. What are you doing? Get back here. We're leaving now. You're crazy. And, she, you know, I couldn't go forward because she was losing her mind. She was hysterical. And she's in the car at this point and head hanging out the window and like, get back in here right now. She's angry too. And I'm like, oh, shoot, you know, 'cause stupid me is fearless. And what better way to die than getting mauled by a Bigfoot?
Right.
I wanted to see it. Maybe foolhardy because they can get dangerous. Some of these Bigfoot people have been attacked, so I had to go. But that was my Bigfoot encounter. We drove off. I didn't. She says it roared a third time. I've trained myself to be a good observer as a researcher, so I'm pretty sure it was twice. But I don't know. Maybe it was 3 times. It was. I mean, it takes you by surprise for sure.
Absolutely, man. That's for you to liken it to a jet or something. That's really loud. I mean, it's not a jet, but the noise, the volume of it, that's shocking, actually.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear people describe it, and then you experience it yourself, and you're like, okay, I get it. I didn't smell anything. Smelling a Bigfoot is actually pretty rare.
Got to go back out there again.
Most common is seeing one run across the road at night. But yeah, the footprint evidence, the hair evidence, the sound recordings, the films, the Patterson footage, I think is legit. With Patterson Gimlin footage in Bluff Creek. I think it's probably real. It's controversial, but there's some great footage out there. Bigfoot is absolutely real. If you don't think so, do your homework. I'm telling you, it's real.
Do your homework and hang out in the Sierra Nevadas with Preston. He'll take you on a tour. That's fascinating, though. I've never seen a Bigfoot or heard of one, but yeah, it sounds pretty legit. These things are out there. They're probably very, very ancient. Yes, the Native Americans do talk about them, and Ron Moorhead thinks that there might have been some interbreeding with the ancients of America with these Bigfoot. Who knows? Because some of them are more human-like, according to Ron. Right. So yeah. Who knows? Who knows?
Boy, there's some ones in Africa that are probably, Neanderthals or Cro-Magnons. Honest to God, which sounds crazy, but if you examine, what has been explored on Earth, we have this sort of misconception that we have explored the entire planet, and that's just not true.
That's not.
Yeah, we've crisscrossed it. We've labeled all the mountains and the rivers and the valleys, but the huge majority of the population is clustered in cities and coastlines, and there are vast, vast tracts of wilderness out there. And if you map all the Bigfoot sightings, you'll see they're in these wilderness areas, often in creek beds and ridge tops. And there's plenty of spaces out there where they could live, and people are describing a huge variety. We've got tiny little things, wild men, and big ones. Some people do think they are Gigantopithecus. I'm not so sure, because it doesn't really match the bones of Gigantopithecus, but could be. Only not that long ago, 10 years, someone started talking about giants on Earth. I'm like, what are you talking about? We're like, look it up. There's been giant bones found all across the planet. And so I did. And that slipped under my radar. I couldn't believe it. Lovelock Cave in Nevada, where there's this reality show, Searching for Giants or something. These 2 guys going from spot to spot. The evidence for giants on Earth in ancient times is very compelling. I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea.
Yeah, the giants. Yeah, Lovelock Cave, what they call them, the Sitka.
Right.
Yeah, back in the ancient times, the Hebrew book, they called them the Amorites or the Malachites or just different names. Every culture has a name for them. But it seems like, yeah, you're right on, Preston. There were giants, and for some reason, once again, the governments don't want you to know. They don't want you to see the proof of it. I mean, there's probably evidence out there, but there's unless some country has them on display out there that I don't know about, you can't see like a full-sized bone of a giant or a skull, or all you hear is stories about the double row of teeth and,
yep. About that.
The natives fought them, and some had like one eye and some had horns, and it's just all kinds of weird stuff out there.
Yep. 6 fingers, by the way, that comes up.
You see, that's interesting because when you mentioned the Nordics or whatever, the tall whites with 6 fingers, and some of these giants had 6 fingers, and you kind of tie that in with these, and this is my opinion, this is speculation. When you tie in these tall whites or Nordics, they're starry host, right? They're from the heavens, they're from space or whatever you want to call it. And how do we know back in ancient times they weren't mating with women of the earth or men of the earth or whatever, and creating these hybrids that were giants and with weird, abnormalities, 6 fingers, and I don't know. It's just,
well, there's writings on that, and it's clear that UFOs and stuff have been around forever. We know this from hieroglyphs and cave paintings and Middle Age wood carvings, and the Romans, of course.
Oh, the Romans, yeah, they knew about
shields.
it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've been around forever. E.T. and Bigfoot and all of this stuff.
Yeah, we discussed the I remember now that Ron Moore did mention that he did come across Bigfoot, I guess handprints with 6 fingers and 6 toes, and kind of tied that in with the Horites, what it means cave dwellers back in the biblical times, back in ancient times. And we're wondering, maybe, once again, this is just conjecture, maybe these Bigfoot are the remnants of these Horite giants, because they are kind of big, right? Like 8 foot, maybe 7 foot, 9 foot. I guess it varies.
Yeah. Some of the Bigfoot get taller than that, 10, 11 foot. I think there's a few.
That's crazy.
Say that's 12 feet. I can't imagine that.
They might.
But we know that they can travel up to like 50 or 60 miles an hour, because there are some cases where people are driving and saw them, or chasing after them in a plane, and they are booking it up these hillsides and down. So, yeah.
That's good information. All this is crazy. This is I called it an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, because it got too good. we discussed UFO stories, ghost hauntings, back to some specifics on the characteristics of extraterrestrials, Bigfoot, giants. I mean, this podcast is loaded, and I'm sure the listeners are going to love listening to it. And I wanted to thank you for coming on and sharing this, Preston. And please give our listeners where to find you, where to find your books, and all that good stuff.
Hey, I appreciate it. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Much. Thank you.
My books are on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookstores, online retailers. You can contact me through my website if you're interested in sharing a story or have a question or a comment. And again, just type my name in on the internet. It should take you there, but it's PrestonDennett.weebly.com. And I do have a YouTube channel where I'm putting out my stuff in case you don't have time to read. And I'm all over social media. You can contact me through Facebook. I'm on Instagram and Twitter as well. And yeah, I think these are important subjects. It's important people know that we're sharing this planet with reptilians. We didn't even get into them, but
no, we can have you back on again, Preston, because I have a story of a reptilian on a ranch I once lived on, but we can talk about that next time.
Hey, yeah, that would be interesting, because I've got some things to say on it. Yeah, UFOs, we're not alone. It's important people know that I think our government has crashed UFOs. We didn't get into that. I've got some good stuff on that, but yeah, I really appreciate you having me on the show. Thanks very much. Absolutely.
This is a no judgment platform. We talk about everything. We talk about UFOs, cryptids, ghost hauntings, everything under the sun. And everyone has their own opinions on what these things are, and that's what we like to keep it like that. We like to just to share the information and let people decide what they want to believe, because I mean, Preston, it's not good to force anything down anyone. It's for them to digest the information and to go from there. And I like it that way. I like people to have their own opinion. Yeah. We should all respect each other's opinions. Exactly. Well, I'm your, before after I play the outro, I'll just hold back a little bit and we'll have a little chat. This is your host, Lionel Tavares. This is the Sabbath at Midnight. The special edition is Dreamland Redux. And tonight, as you heard, we had Preston Dennett on. He's a renowned researcher in this field of cryptids and UFOs and all that interesting stuff. You can find us on Facebook, Sabbath at Midnight Podcast, and on Instagram, The Sabbath at Midnight. You can reach me by email at Dominic, DOMINIC sabbathatmidnight@gmail.com. And if you've had any experiences, whatever it may be, once again, this is no judgment. We take all information and we respect it, and we respect your feelings on what you may have experienced. So from an area not too far from Dreamland, this is the Sabbath at Midnight, closing out.